Good afternoon. So the paper that I'm going to discuss today is actually part of my thesis for my MPhil in Sociology and Social Policy, which is, I'm trying to specialize in childhood and youth studies. Okay, so to avoid yung extension, so I'll try to just read what I've prepared, kasi if not, I'll carry the whole unit. So, yeah. So when the curtain calls accounts of childhood and negotiations of spaces in the performing arts, the case of QCPADFI is actually Quezon City Performing Arts Development Foundation Incorporated. So it's a semi-government, semi-private organization that caters to urban poor children within Quezon City. So here we see children from different backgrounds, urban poor backgrounds. Merong street kid, merong children na yung magulang nila ay nagbubuti, or may mga single parent, yung mga children from single parent household, etc. So the research probes into an understanding of children, understanding of children and childhood in a specialized, multifaceted space such as QCPADFI through addressing the following issue. By multifaceted, kasi here I recognize Quezon City, the QCPADFI as three spaces at once, and you will see that later. That it's a space for urban poor children or childhood, and a space for the performing arts and urban poverty. So these are the research questions or problems that I try to address. So how do the scholars go about their everyday life, manage their activities, and comply with institutional requirements? How do they perceive the QCPADFI and their engagement with it, in the program and its effects on them? How are the scholars able to live their childhood in QCPADFI and within Amoranto, that's the location of QCPADFI? What spaces open up for the scholars within Amoranto? How do they make use of these spaces? What do these spaces require of them? And how do they respond to these requirements? So, in the end, ang overall aim is to look at the kind of childhood lived in these spaces. So it is the research intention, therefore, to probe into the particular childhood within QCPADFI, which it aims to achieve through providing the descriptions of the following. So the QCPADFI is a collective world of multi-characters who are predominantly children and adolescents. The scholars' individual worlds, that's through individual narratives or stories, and the methods by which the scholars traverse and reproduce their various worlds. So in this study, the terms scholars and young performing artists will be used interchangeably when referring to the research participants who are children and adolescents from an urban poor background who have been with the program for a year or more and whose parents or guardians have willingly given them permission to participate, in as much as it's the scholars' decision themselves to participate in this research. So to clarify, the research will focus only on childhood as exhibited by the young performing artists of the QCPADFI within the ages of 7 to 18 during the course of this study. It will not attempt to arrive at the generalization of the concept of children's experiences or new characteristics. So my theoretical orientation, just to give a brief background, prior to the 1990s, or during the 1990s, nagkaroon ng paradigm shift pagdating sa pag-view ng childhood or children. Before that, most of yung mga studies on children and childhood are, ang framework na ginagamit are usually socialization or yung nasa developmental studies or developmental psychology, which looks at children in its potential or becoming. Kaya nga ang focus is how do we hold them to become, yung productive adults. But with the, yung mga nangyari, with the varieties of childhood, dahil doon sa economic crisis, so we witness different kinds of childhood. May mga, yung mga urban poor children, the children in conflict with the law, children caught in armed conflicts, yung mga street children, and so on. So dito, na-realize that there is no such thing as universal childhood or universal children, yung characteristic na universal to children. But that childhood should be viewed in its social context. And that they shouldn't be seen, kasi there is this universal concept of childhood, di ba? Na that they are innocent, they are passive, no, they are playful, yung ganong view, which basically irrational and possible tingin sa kanila. But because of those circumstances, yung crisis na yan, we witness children who are in reality, di ba, are not just aware of their condition, but are doing something to help, for example, the family. No? Kaya nga, yung universal, like yung universal right ng child, medyo questionable in a way na if children, do children really feel exploited when they are working for their family? No? Most studies would show from the perspective of children, and that's how sociology of childhood is, yung kanyang orientation, the children will feel that they are somehow empowered because of their capacity to work, and their ability to contribute to their family and to somehow have access to certain services, yung tipo ganyan, or goods which are normally not within their reach. So sociology of childhood, this is basically oriented towards interpretive constructionism and sociology, recognizes one, that there are not one, but a variety of childhood. That childhood is a social construction that is, it is constructed, defined, socially through interaction. And that childhood is a variable for social analysis like gender. Kasi nga, you can see that there are different kinds of childhood. There are children male, female, have different ethnic, ethnic characteristics, etc. So it's also good to when doing research, you should also see yung children or childhood as part of the research process for this content. And children and being a child as a variable in itself. So here, aside from that, childhood is also seen as a social space. Now, when we see childhood as a social space, we recognize that children also has their own culture, and that children also are involved in different kinds of relationship. And being, engaged in several relationships, they also have roles, and there are expectations on them. So here, looking at it that way, then it is therefore important to recognize that children are worthy of study in their own right. And this might be an important contribution, lalo na when we're doing policies and programs for children. We have to also be aware of their perspective. Kasi, dito nga, yung recognition din is that children are basically social actors. That they are actively engaged in in their own social world. Kasi kung titignan natin, prior to the 1990s, most of the studies are actually adult representations of children. And by that, with that turn in yung paradigm shift, nagkaroon ng recognition that there are actually two spaces. Even from the yung location ng children, that there is such thing as an adult-defined children's space and children-defined space. So here, okay, so the conceptual framework. Now it's important to see the social context of these children. So here we see QCPADFI, by virtue of its function as a performing arts training center for urban children, is endowed with yung sinabi ko kanina na multifaceted character. It is at once a site of the performing arts, urban poverty, and childhood. The scholars' family and educational background, being students of public schools, are socially situated within urban poverty, while their membership in this institution, being yung family and education, further locates them in childhood. So the QCPADFI, being the specific social space for such convergence, can be viewed as a collective world of the scholars. In as much as if that's the collective world, then we can view each child as a microcosm of that world. So yun siya. Okay, so next, so the research methodology. Now, part actually of the childhood sociology is a recognition of ethnography as the most appropriate methodology. Because with ethnography is a recognition of yung social context, and ethnography as a method is flexible. siya. So, ethnography, both verbal and visual, was employed in the study as it allows for flexibility of techniques and movement in going beyond the surface of a phenomenon under study. The nature of the research and the research participants, as well as their latter social location, facilitated such a decision with the methodology's known strength in penetrating a multi-space and multi-character setting. As a method, ethnography complements the need to take into account the Filipino psychology, kasi nga nakafocus din siya sa context, which is oriented on familism and personalism, hence making possible the incorporations of techniques indigenous to the research, cultural, anyway, so this research also incorporates Filipino methods of research. That, yan, basically siya yan. In there, actually, participant observation. So, different degrees of immersion. Now, scholars' profiles, again, paki-check na lang, paki-basa na lang, or if you want a copy of the full paper, I will gladly give you. Okay, so let's go to the synthesis of the scholars' narratives. Okay, so yun yung, basically, yung narratives nila, the verbal narratives, written narratives, yan yung mga themes. And this illustrates children's awareness and active engagement in defining their life in institutional context. Now, findings. Okay, so the data shows that the scholars are actively engaged in both their individual and collectively shared worlds. Here we see that the children actually traverses 3 spaces every day. That's the space of the home where urban poverty is, the space of the performing arts, and the school. Each of these spaces have expectations, institutional requirements to the children. So here we see the children's agency, therefore they're not passive. So the universal view of them is not correct. No? So here we see children negotiating every moment. No? So they negotiate institutional requirements with their needs. And in the process, kasi nga sobrang dami nilang activities, no, the development of a personal routine per se is an instance of that negotiation and therefore children's agency. No? So, yon. Okay, next please. So here, the scholars' perception of QCPADFI and their engagement on it. So that's how they see the impact of QCPADFI on them. One, on the personal level, there is character change and personality, and you will see that in the picture mamaya. So it gives an opportunity to travel. Kasi these kids actually, those two, they represent the country. No? Kaya most of them, nakarating na ng Macau, etc. And they compete internationally. Japan, and even some parts of Europe. Then, on the personal level, so that's it. And then there's the family level, being contributors in the domestic economy. And then, yung economic impact nito on them is that they are economically empowered somehow because not only do they see how yung kanilang contribution is a family, but that they also have yung increasing purchasing power. Nakakabili sila ng cellphone, nakakapag-computer sila, etc. No? So, meron din cultural, so that's their exposure to different culture, and of course, they become young ambassadors when they go outside the country. So, their view on the QCPADFI, ayan siya. Their mentors, by the way, are actually, mga sila LLR, these are, mga national artists. And this is their service doon sa community. Okay, so next slide, please. So ayan yung So in terms of spaces, within QCPADFI, so there are, as I've said, and this is witnessed there as well. So there are 2 spaces, those that are defined by children and those that are, adult defined themselves. By the first, that's actually adult defined din kasi katulad ng dance studio or ng stage, may mga required behavior dyan. But when there is, for example, no training, then they can convert that into play spaces. So that's when the spaces become children defined. And therefore, if these spaces are children defined, it temporary lang yung nature. And it only appears at the moment of its, yung creation. And then you have adult defined spaces, of course, a lot of the spaces are in reality adult defined. Okay? Next slide, please. These are just the pictures, so this is the visual ethnography. Just to give you an idea of how these children create their space. So this is social processes captured through the camera. So let me go now to just to summarize. So variables such as childhood, poverty, and the performing arts have produced the specific childhood particular to scholars of QCPADFI. As a discussion have demonstrated, I hope it did, among the scholars are several, not one childhood. Each of these images is created in the various social spaces the scholars traverse by the interaction between these spaces' structured reality, the adult characters in these spaces, and the actors themselves. More appropriately, the process is then a social production, where childhood in each space is an instance of a scholar's engagement in that space. Hence, the resilient child is witnessed in an instance of resiliency, an economically empowered child in an experience of greater purchasing power, the carefree, playful child in moments of play, the serious dance trainee in an episode of dance instruction, a young dance performer in an occasion of performance, and so on. No? So while childhood is in itself a structured space defined through time that defines the ongoing childhood, as a social production it must recognize the essential participation of children, where an instance of the child's engagement is a moment of childhood production. This finds further articulation in what James and Proud saw in their work. By the way, James and Proud are the forerunners of the sociology of childhood. Well, evaluation on the time of childhood, where they observed the latter to be defining and in turn is being defined by a time in childhood. However, while my research did not go into a detailed demonstration of the social production of childhood through time, my research reveals its social production in the instance of childhood within the multifaceted spaces of urban poverty, the performing arts, and childhood, where none other than the children themselves are the best source of such accounts. Now, since it's it's a research about the children and it's their work, I need to give them their voice. If I need to give you the opportunity to hear their voice. So, here is just an example. Just yung bahagi lang ng kanyang narrative. When I was not doing ballet yet, sabi ni Melissa and ni Mary Ann, she's 16. She started early in the foundation. 6 years old pa lang siya, nandiyan na siya. And she's part of yung highest level 6, level 5 na siya. No? So dito, sabi niya, and she's teaching ballet na rin pala, by the way. No? So when I was not doing ballet yet, I used to roam around the neighborhood. I often got spanked because I was always out. But when I started ballet, I'm usually tired. Whenever I reach home, I used to just stay out inside and practice what was taught in the studio. Sometimes Kuya is also a scholar, and I dance at home. I acquired discipline, and from then on, seldom do I play with our neighbors' children. There are times when I envied them as I can no longer do what the normal kid does. But I don't regret my decision because when I came in, I really like what I was doing, and it feels good to have gone to different places. It really felt good knowing that while still a kid, I've been to a lot of places. Now, just to wrap up then, methodological input. Since this is ethnography, and ethnography is about accounts, different accounts, narratives. Here, I cannot say that this story is just the researcher telling the stories, but this account is actually accounts of childhood, because there are several authors in this text. I recognize children, kaya research participants sila, as authors, co-authors. And by the way, I've also introduced different methods by which children can participate without feeling exploited. Like if they feel like they want to write a journal, and kasi children, they really want to draw, they really want to write, and they want to tell stories. So, thank you very much. And